So today I want to differentiate between intellectual learning and intuitive learning. Okay, and intuitive learning is like the learning of the body. And how this becomes useful is, as we start living, more from being our open-hearted, this openness and this way, going through life with an open heart, going through life and allowing energy in and allowing myself to feel and trusting my intuition, that it requires an intuitive learning. And what I mean by intuitive, it's like the body is learning and we're getting a feel for it rather than from our intellect. Okay? And so let's start. Of course, we were conditioned in grade school. We were taught intellectual learning. We were taught to use our brain. Hopefully, we were taught critical thinking. That can be very helpful. But we weren't really taught, unless we maybe were learning to play a musical instrument, or we were in the shop a lot and we were figuring things out. We weren't doing as much, of this intuitive learning where we're getting a feel for things. The way we do that is it's a different type of learning. It primarily works through trial and error. Okay, through trying things, making a mistake, and then trying a little more this, and then a little more this, until we get it right. And it's based on getting a feel for it. Okay, there's an example of this when we do the dream interpretation class. There's the intellectual understanding of what the symbols mean of the dreams. We can learn, you can take Jungian courses in mythology and learn all the symbols intellectually. But then in the class, that the way I've been trained to do dream interpretation is you get an intuitive feel for the dream. You see the symbols and the intellectual foundation is a starting place, but then you work with it to get a feel for it. And it's a much more messy process. But in the end, you get a dream interpretation that feels right, And so that is the invitation. Now, this can be challenging, especially for us, perfectionists. We're not trained, this trial and error means there's an error part, which means we have to make mistakes, okay? And it feels like when we're trained to not make mistakes, don't screw up, be competent, get it right. And that, so we have to challenge that a little bit and be willing to kind of fumble through things. It's a practice. Even when we say spiritual practice, it doesn't, if we have a meditation or a Tai Chi practice or a yoga practice, we're learning to get a feel for it, and we're making mistakes like all the time, and a lot of us are conditioned it's not okay to make mistakes. But actually, this intuitive learning, we learn from our mistakes. So mistakes aren't bad, they're part of the process. It's a little too hard, it's like the Goldilocks thing. It's a little too hard, a little too soft, just right. Now, if we get a feel for that in our interactions in life, a little too assertive, a little too little assertive. We need to be stronger, a little more vulnerable, a little more strong, and we're learning as we interact. We're learning to how to be in our personal power more. And at first it comes off and it's like, bam, and the person's like, whoa. And it's like a little too hard, too much. It's like, okay, in this a little too wimpy. It needs to have a little more. I'm still explaining myself. It has a little more power, and then we get a feel for it. And so that's my invitation, is to kind of take something that you're learning and is kind of heart-based way of walking, that maybe it's in a relationship. Intuitive learning works really good for intimacy and being in relationship. Okay, it works really good for art and playing a musical instrument and doing ceremony and doing energy work. These are arts, okay, more than sciences. There's a science to them as well, but they're an art, meaning that you feel your way through them. You get a feel for it. So So that's kind of, I just wanted to lay that out, the difference. And there's a time for intellectual learning, but there's also a time for this intuitive learning. And then we can learn to live intuitively, and we can find discernment, and we can get a feeling of flow, you know. So anyway, that is my video for this week. Thank you so much for watching. And I hope you have a great week, and maybe just try a little bit, kind of feeling your way through life a little more, and employing some intuitive learning. And I will see you in a week.